Hey, everybody. Welcome to the GMI Rocket Show. I'm your host, Roman Zelchenko, former immigration lawyer turned tech entrepreneur. I'm the founder of Laborless, an immigration tech platform that automates H-1B visa compliance, and also the founder of GMI Rocket, which is a digital marketing agency for the immigration industry, and of course, which brings you this show. Today's episode number 113. It's a really special one. We have two co-founders on the show, one of whom is a repeat guest, somebody who's been on the show previously. So today our guests are Greg Siskind and Josh Waddell, who are the co-founders of a company called Visalaw.ai. So Visalaw.ai is basically a generative AI product that helps with legal research, specifically for immigration lawyers. It has a ton of primary sources built right into it so that when you're doing research, you're getting responses back that have citations, that have references, etc. There is also a drafting tool that it provides for immigration lawyers. It's a really great product. So Greg actually was previously on the show with talking about Visalaw.ai a couple of years ago. The product, though, was much different. This was before the whole ChatGPT generative AI boom. And so I thought it was a really great opportunity for him to come back and also join with Josh, his co-founder, to talk about, where the product is now and sort of how different it is. It's basically a brand new business. So I'm excited for this episode. Before they jump in, I do want to say thank you to the main sponsor of this episode, which is DocketWise. So for the immigration folks out there who may not have heard of DocketWise before, it is an all-in-one immigration case management platform. They provide, best-in-class immigration forms, really customizable questionnaires. It's something that they've been kind of a leader in since they really started years ago. Integrations with all sorts of products, including my company, Laborless, and really great customer service. One of the things I really like about them that I always mention at the beginning of the show is just all the content that they also create for the immigration industry. Yes, they're a tech company, but they have a podcast. They have a great blog that's always being updated. They have webinars. They have an ebook on their website. They have a lot of great stuff that they put together. They support shows like this, which allow me to bring great stuff to the immigration industry as well. So I'm really grateful for them for their support. Check out DocketWise if you can. There's a link in the show notes, or visit docketwise.com. Just tell them that you heard about them from the GMI Rocket Show. Anyways, really long introduction. But I'm very excited. Greg and Josh, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it, you guys. And, super excited to dig into kind of Visalaw.ai 2.0, if you will.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Roman. Yeah, we're excited to be here. Excited to be on your show.
So with two people, I kind of like to go back and forth. By the way, for folks who are watching or tuning in live, if you have any questions or comments as we go, please, shout them out. I know, Greg and you were on a panel recently. There were so many questions about AI in the immigration space. So yes, we're going to talk about the product, but I think it would be interesting if folks have questions for you both about either your company or AI and immigration law in general. Leave them in the comments, and we'll bring them up here live on the show. So I will say, for folks to get the full scoop about you, Greg, I'll start with you. We did an episode together a couple of years ago, so I definitely recommend folks check out that episode. Actually, I'll drop a comment. I'll drop a link to it in the comments. But for those who may not know you or may not know you really well, can you give just a little bit of background? You practice in Memphis, Tennessee, immigration law. You're also known as the person who had the first, or one of the first ever websites, on the internet for law firm. So can you talk a little bit about kind of, your law school days, maybe what you did pre-immigration law, and then how you transitioned into immigration?
Yeah. So I didn't, in law school, I didn't have a tech background. I didn't have an immigration background. When I went to law school, I had, in fact, I wasn't even sure I was going to be a lawyer. I was young, but I was thinking that I was probably I always heard a law degree was a good thing to have, especially if you didn't really know what you were going to be doing. And I figured eventually I'll figure out what I want to do. I went to a large law firm after I went to law school in Chicago, and I went to a large law firm in Nashville. Why there? Because I had friends. I went to college there. I had friends there, and I thought that if I'm going to be quitting this profession in the next year or two, at least I'll be in a place where I know a lot of people, and I'll figure it out what I want to do there. So I started in corporate in mergers and acquisitions, doing a lot of due diligence and junior associate work. Immigration case landed on my desk relatively early on, and I suddenly figured out that this is a lot more interesting for me, at least for me. So I wanted to get into that space. But Nashville in the early 1990s was not exactly a booming immigration market. So I was nervous that whether I thought I was going to have to leave the city, or I would, I'd never be able to, and I couldn't find a job locally in that space. So that kind of gave me the impetus to figure out how to find clients from out of town. And also I was going to have to do it as a solo, or in my own practice, because I was not going to find any willing employers to employ an immigration lawyer at the time. So all of that kind of was the background that led me to both starting Siskind Susser, which we just had our 30th anniversary last summer. And
Congratulations.
also, thank you. And also, that was the impetus. It was necessity, was the impetus to get online back at that time. Timing was really fortuitous that the internet boom was just, in its very early stages. And then I happened to stumble into it. Really like probably 1991, 92, I got a computer with a modem, and this was before the web. They had message boards, and I had there were some on immigration, believe it or not, back in the early 90s, with mostly no lawyers, and a lot of mostly IT professionals and people at universities. And that was my entree to the internet, was just answering questions. Basically an inexperienced lawyer had to go look up the answers to the questions, and then posting answers to questions, and then turning into matters. And I was realizing that there's an opportunity there, since it's a federal practice area, and it was all done by mail, postal mail, no e-filing or anything like that. And it seemed like the perfect practice for the internet, particularly for a lawyer in a place with no clients. That was and then the web came in 93, and that was, for me, it was sort of like a big light bulb popped up, that this is how I'm going to do it.
Did you think at that time, there's so many discussions or stories of people at the time who said, yeah, this internet thing is a fad. It's never going to catch on. Did you have those thoughts at all? Or did you feel confident? Or were you kind of like, look, I've got nothing to lose. I might as well sort of try this thing out, build a website, etc.
I heard that comment from a lot of people who thought it was like stupid that I was leaving a very, safe job in a large law firm to go down this road. And they were nice about it, but I think they were worried I was going to starve to death. But I knew there was a gap in the market, especially where I was looking is I was thinking about colleges in small towns that don't have immigration lawyers with a lot of immigration needs. And I was thinking also about IT, workers in IT related fields who have internet access, and also universities had internet access. Those were the two places. If you looked at 1992, 93, who was, probably 75% of people's access to the internet were those, either tech companies or university towns. And, for me, it just seemed like I've always sort of like taken a look at done market research before I dove into anything. And it just made a lot of sense, even if I couldn't really explain it that well to people who are, were my friends and relatives. So I believed in it from the beginning. There were some things that I didn't expect, especially, good things that came. Like there was a tremendous amount of free publicity that I got at that time. I had no idea there was going to be this media frenzy for all things web related. I mean, it was like, who's in cyberspace today on there? And you could just have a website, and you could be on the front page of a magazine or a newspaper for that. And so I got a lot of exposure really quickly which was a pleasant surprise. That wasn't what I was counting on.
Sorry, keep going.
So I guess that's the answer to your question on there is that, yeah, I think it was, there was a lot of skepticism. There's still also, you see these articles that people are saying it's like internet is this passing fad on there.
Keep going. I have to.
Okay. So that was in 94. I guess the other thing that was sort of the early discovery at that time was that I like to write. And I wrote a book about internet marketing for the American Bar Association that came out in 1996. And that also put me on this different journey, which was as a publisher. And that was something that I had done I was a co-author on another book beforehand that was in environmental law, believe it or not. And I had experience as an author from that, but that probably, the web was a really good way to sort of, I just thought of it as a publishing platform and not as necessarily sort of like, something that was tech. I was thinking this is a way to get out my content, and books are a way to get out your content. Well, they didn't have blogs yet, but I did an email newsletter and posted articles on my blog from the beginning. The email newsletter also just turned 30 years old this year as well on there. And I think that was actually the first email newsletter for a law firm anywhere. And it's still around, but that was, so for me, I always looked at this as sort of as you can, like, video and is obviously a major way that you use it. But for me, it was a way to get my writing out.
Yeah, and I think, for folks who are listening, especially, now you think, okay, yeah, websites, everyone's got to have a website, and email newsletters are a thing, but it's less about the medium that you were using. And to me, I mean, the lesson is sort of more about mindset. You're looking at uncharted territories, you're looking at new technologies where email was a new technology, websites were a new technology, based on the internet. And you just sort of put yourself out there. And number one, yes, you took a risk because you're putting your time and energy into a thing that you weren't sure was going to be adopted or whatnot. But on the other hand, the flip side of it is you didn't have a lot of competition on the web. Like you said, you're the first person there. You're the first person with a newsletter. Anybody who has a website, you could be on the front page of or be in a news story because you just are the only person doing it.
It took about 2 years for the next immigration lawyer to get a website out. So I had a nice lead time, which was helpful as well.
So I hope that people, who are listening, just think about, I mean, first of all, so many people today are still wondering, do they need a website? What digital marketing tools are useful to them? And look, fine, I'm not judging people's ideas about business, but for those who are already digitally native, continue to think about what are some new avenues where you can, market yourself, put out content, kind of educate and reach people, et cetera. You probably didn't think that a blog would be a place to eventually, get clients from. Maybe you did. I don't know, but you were probably just like sharing knowledge in this new way from the perspective of, I want to educate people, put myself out there. Yeah.
I mean, the first blog was actually for us was in 98. And it was there was an H-1B bill that was moving in Congress to increase the number of H-1B visas, like triple the number of H-1B visas. Mm-hmm. And this was the term blog hadn't been, it was going to come out a couple months later. I think it was like late 97, early 98, but it was I just called it my journal on what was happening in Congress on this particular issue. And I would have FTP, file transfer protocol, and I would have a text file. And all I would do on this thing is I would have timestamps, and I would say, this is what happened on here, or this is the action, the action suggestion that you could take. And I would post that every day. As far as, you can imagine there was a lot of interest in that particular subject on there. But that was that proved to be a very effective way to sort of do something that was sort of in real time, not in real time, but in like a much faster mode of communications, doing it that way, where I could have something within, a few minutes of something happening or some kind of vote happening and all that, where I could kind of update people on there. And that's how I did it at the time. And I shut that down once the bill passed, and it passed. Actually, that was sort of the end of that. But it sort of gave me a lot of encouragement that's going to be a very effective way to communicate with people.
I love it. That's so cool. And by the way, we have a comment here. I don't know who it is because I think their security on their LinkedIn profile doesn't tell them, but they said, so interesting, Greg. It's always fun to learn about the journey. And I mean, this is why I love the show and I love hearing these stories, because number one, it's certainly interesting. But number two, I think you can pick up on really useful patterns in terms of, okay, what worked in the past? What mindset did you have for that to work? And how do you implement that in the future? So before, Josh, we jump to you, Greg, just one kind of last question. So, this was sort of the early days. You were, definitely leading the way in terms of technology. You had a blog, you had, a journal at the time, you had a website, you were publishing content, you broke off into the immigration niche. Obviously, eventually, Siskind Susser grew into the firm it is today. You've continued. I mean, you were always and still are a big voice on Twitter/X, right? And just in general, what made you kind of think about starting to leverage technology to build something in-house? I know the first iteration of Visalaw.ai was sort of a suite of tools. You were experimenting with no-code, low-code tools, meaning you weren't building this whole suite of solutions from scratch. Kind of what was the impetus for you to do that? And how did you get to, a place where you said, this isn't going to be just a little side project. We want this to be a unit of our business? Because I think that's going to be a nice time to bring in Josh to hear about his side of the story, and then how he eventually joined, Visalaw.ai.
Yeah, I mean, so around 2015, we got. I was at a conference and I met a fellow named Michael Mills, who was a co-founder of a company called Neurologic. And I didn't know much about this at the time, but I mean, they were building old school. I'd still use this term, old school AI expert system software, and it was this low code or no code. I think it was no code, but it was basically, the idea was that lawyers without coding skills could design expert system apps. Now, what's an expert system app? It's basically an elaborate a flow chart. Essentially, you design a question set. Depending on how you answer the question, it goes to the next question and the next question. And you can go down many paths, and then eventually it will generate a response or a document or a yes or a no or something. It will come to some kind of conclusion when you're done with it. And I saw it demonstrated. I think actually, maybe it was there was a labor and employment firm that was doing something where they were taking a company through this question set to figure out whether some new law applied to them on there. And it's like, wow, that could be really interesting in the immigration space. And so we started playing around with it, and we decided to do, the Obama administration had released the DAPA rules. Now, people who've been in immigration for a while remember this. This is Deferred Action for Parents of Americans. This was going to be for all of the parents of DACA recipients or parents of U.S. citizens. Anyway, it was going to be a program for like 4 million people. And we decided this would be a good entree to this, if we could build an app that would tell people whether they qualified for this new benefit or not. And so taking you through the questions, and it seems fairly low tech today compared to what you see, but we were building this thing, and then obviously it was tied up in the courts, and there was going to be a Supreme Court decision. This is in June of 2016. The Supreme Court is actually at the AILA conference. I think it was the AILA conference in Las Vegas at the time on there. But this decision was going to be coming out because the Supreme Court was one of the last decisions, and AILA has its conference in June. And we had this big plan where we were going to release our app, release it in Spanish and a separate one in Spanish and one in English. And it was going to have, we did press releases, we did all this stuff. And it was sort of like just rolling the dice that we were going to get a good decision from the Supreme Court, which it was, sort of like the odds were probably about 50-50. The court split 4-4, but because Justice Kagan, I think, she had to recuse herself because it defaulted to the decision of a lower court. So DAPA was bye-bye. And the app never saw the light of day, but we went through this whole exercise of like learning how to create it. That was the most valuable thing, was just like learning how to design for that. And then we did many, many, many after that. We started really getting going during the Trump administration with these travel ban apps. And we did one, I took a week off of work once to learn the public charge rule that was in the Trump administration and designed a very elaborate decision tree app that would help lawyers figure out if their clients were subject to the new rules. And it was very thorough on there. And we were able to release it a couple of days after the rule was coming out. So we got a lot of practice in that. And that was just an extension of like stuff I was doing as a lawyer in the law firm. It was only a couple of years later that we decided to spin the tech products off into its own company. And we started building out, more and more tools. We were going down this road where we were actually looking at doing we were thinking about creating a case management system, and we were thinking about a I-9 system that we were potentially going to be looking at doing. And we looked at a lot of things, and we were in the process of planning those out. We had gone down the road with Fastcase. They were planning on doing an immigration case management system that and they got acquired and moved in a different direction, and decided not to do an immigration case management system. But this was all around the time that generative AI was starting. And it was like perfect for us because we had the flexibility at that point still to do a pivot in that space. I was lucky enough to be one of the early testers of Casetext CoCounsel product, wonderful product that is aimed at the general legal space for legal research, and really got to appreciate that this is something good. We also came to the conclusion that their product was not going to be really a great fit for immigration law. It didn't have the materials. It really wasn't sort of customized for the way immigration lawyers need to get information. And that's when we decided that we could do something like that, but really focus on immigration lawyers. And that's what got us going in the spring of 2023, which sounds like a long time ago at this point. It feels like a long time ago, but it's really not that long.
That's awesome. I love that. I love that story. Yeah, thank you for sharing. And crazy to me that you put all this time and energy into the DAPA product, and then of course it didn't launch. I mean, what a sort of tradition. I don't even know the right adjective for it, but I guess like a really dramatic kind of startup story. You put all this time, and then you did the press release, and there was so much buzz about it, and then boom, the whole thing fell apart.
Well, we had it right. We had everything ready to go, including the press release. The press release never got issued.
Because I see. I thought the press release.
Everything was. We just had to click send.
It was all ready. The whole thing was done. We were ready to go like gangbusters on this, and it was a gamble, and we lost. But it was, like I said, it was a great learning experience for us.
Yeah, and and it shows that this was not, you weren't deflated from that. You said, all right, it didn't work out, but we learned a ton. So let's move on from there. Okay, so Greg, I want to pause on you for a moment, and Josh, thank you for so patiently waiting. I want to turn to you now. And kind of, we're going to go back in time a little bit, but then I do want to end up in that same place. So, you today are the co-founder of Visalaw.ai, and you're sort of really
And the
heading the
CEO.
charge,
He's
and the
he's the
CEO,
CEO.
and right, and the CEO, and so you're heading the charge in terms of product and everything, marketing and everything. But I want to go back. You don't come from a traditional sort of either legal or tech background. So can you talk a little bit about kind of maybe where you're from and kind of your story? You're originally from, I know you're in Tennessee now. You were from Alabama. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, talk about the heart of Dixie. No, I'm just kidding. So yeah, born and raised in Alabama. No connection to Memphis at all, or really to the law firm before. Again, it seems like just a pure chance and life. The way that things sort of series of events kind of come together and things happen. Yeah, I'm originally from rural North Alabama, a little place called Muscle Shoals. And born, both sides of my family are from there. Nothing there really, historically speaking, except some music history. They did have some important musicians record there back in the day, but otherwise it's just agriculture. There's really no other industry in that part of the country. And ended up staying in Alabama for college. I went to a little private college in Birmingham, Alabama called Samford, where I received a classics degree, ancient Roman and Greek history. So that is my educational background.
So you're primed and ready for battle, is what you are.
Exactly. If you want to talk Greek history, let's sit down. No, so obviously not your traditional approach to things. I really did think when I graduated that I would when I went to college, I actually thought I was going to become a preacher, a Baptist minister. And, this is the narrative, right? The small town Alabama native who, born in that part of the world. And, I don't think I'd ever been told that there was anything else out there for me, so I go to college, and at least, even though I'm still in Alabama, I'm in a bigger city, more things happening. I see there's just a lot more out there. And frankly, things that I would probably be more gifted at. And so I then decided I wanted to do law school, I thought. So I joined AmeriCorps after college, and that's what took me to Memphis. So I was working inner city Memphis. I just really wanted, I've been in a classroom my whole life. I wanted to kind of get into something, work, and was working in various parts of the city. We were doing mostly tax relief, for low income families, and working with other nonprofits to provide some free healthcare services, and partnering with those folks. So yeah, it was a really meaningful kind of year and some change that I was in Memphis. Had no plans of staying in Memphis, was actually just, going to do that short-term kind of AmeriCorps stint and then going to go back to college. I decided though, I wanted to stay. Various circumstances kept me in Memphis. I was like, well, I'm here. I've met a bunch of folks. I like the city, and I needed a job. So there was a job posting for Siskind Sussor. It was called, gosh, I can't remember what the title was. It was like this made up title. It's like you couldn't even come up with it if you could, if you tried. It was like standardization, assistant. I don't even know. It was like a glorified runner, basically, a glorified intern. And all we did was, well, Greg, you probably don't even remember this, but when I got the job, my first task was to read this book called The Checklist Manifesto. It was basically this whole book about standardizing, processes and lists. And so when I started the firm, it really wasn't even about tech at all. There was no underlying technical role. It was just take all these systems at our firm and let's just standardize them. Let's make all these checklists, and so we can become more efficient. That was the whole idea, increase efficiency. Well, yeah, soon after, this is kind of the overlap where some of the things Greg was talking about, right? So, soon after the tech kind of came in, but again, it was just this really, for me, it was just a discovery period of time. You're young, you're trying to figure things out after college. You do want some kind of income, so you need kind of some kind of job. And, but it was interesting because I was starting to see myself, especially working with Greg. And, when he hired me, I was like, man, I'm around a bunch of lawyers who don't want to practice law. And they're doing all that they can to not use their law degree. And so I started rethinking it a little bit, well, maybe law school isn't the best path. And I started to realize I really liked the business aspects of the firm. I really enjoyed, helping lead an organization in perhaps some different ways. right? Other than I was thinking in my head, it's like I could be a subpar lawyer, or like go to law school and probably never use my degree, or I could, after kind of being in this job for a few years, maybe it's business, maybe like helping an organization grow, helping an organization strategically, whether that's in the financial, HR, operations, software, like all those other kind of buckets. I just felt like that was what I enjoyed, is what kind of got me up in the morning. So that's where the transition was for me. So I decided at that point, okay, I'm not gonna go the law school route. I'm gonna go the kind of business route, and then ended up again just going back, getting an MBA, because I had no historical other than just my dad being pretty entrepreneurial and having a bunch of his own little businesses growing up. Like there was no, real true education there in business. And so that was basically what got me to, I guess you could say, kind of bringing us real time to what Greg kind of ended, talking about the firm.
Did you, so when you were getting your MBA, would you do that full time and you kept working, or did you keep working at the firm at the same time?
Well, no, I was working full time. It was during COVID. So it was 2020. Well, actually I started before COVID. It was like 2019 when I applied, but there were a handful of, again, business school is a lot more flexible than law school on this, but it was entirely remote. So I went to Auburn, still paying homage to the homeland, I guess there. But it was all online. I think I went to the campus twice, and it was part-time. It was very flexible. Professors were, it was actually amazing how flexible it was. And so, I was able to keep a full-time job, do that part-time. I think it took maybe, so like 2.5 years, 2 years, maybe 2.5, something like that.
That's amazing. I think going to business school and also working at a firm on the business side is great, because you can sort of implement things you're learning basically in real time. Which is awesome.
It was a very chaotic time of life. I got married in 2020. My wife also went back to school. She's now a nurse. And so all of these things were sort of happening all at the same time, as of course, the world is basically shutting down. But it was, but we made it. Those kind of years are kind of a blur, but we're here now. So worked out.
A question. First of all, a comment here from Marianne, who is a fellow immigration. First of all, she says, "Oh my God, I have a classics degree too." So, Josh, you're not the only one. She also says the Checklist Manifesto is a great informative book. As you were reading the Checklist Manifesto, look, I'm bringing it back to, okay, you have a degree in classics, so you spent 4 years reading about Roman history, Greek history, maybe something else around that kind of time and era. Maybe I'm really stretching it here, but both civilizations were some of the greatest historically in terms of building urban infrastructure, certain things that still exist today, right? You go to some of these like fountains and whatnot, and across the former Roman Empire, they still work. They still transfer water from place to place, or aqueducts that are still in use. Did any of that resonate? Again, maybe I'm pulling here, for some connection, but do you feel like maybe any of that resonated with what you're doing now? Or at least what you were doing at the time, which is sort of trying to understand how you can create infrastructure within a business, rather than within an empire, for example.
building our own little Siskind empire.
Totally. Kind of, right? Every business is its own little empire.
And the classics of, obviously, I honestly think the revolution of AI will actually bring back more of the humanitarian studies. I hope it does, right? Because I think you've seen over the last several years, the universities have really, leaned towards, obviously STEM fields, and that makes a lot of sense because those are very practical degrees. There's a job waiting for you when you get an engineering degree,
right?
And so, but I do think having this, it's essentially just, some people might call it well-roundedness. I think it's really just strategic, logical reasoning, being able to think critically, right? Like we're in our day and age, you get it, there's just so much, right? It's like, sometimes it's hard to even think for yourself. The idea behind the humanities, I think generally speaking, is to learn how to, read something, digest something. You can go back to like civilizations and, political rules and all these sorts of things, but I think there maybe somehow in all of that there could be a connection. But I think fundamentally, what I gleaned from that was, just this ability to strategically think, for myself in ways, I have to get something out of it, right? Maybe I'm not applying that Greek as much as maybe thought I would when I thought I was going to seminary or something, but it all worked out.
Listen, I can jump in and comment that classics degree was a very much a plus when I was originally interviewing Josh, that I thought that somebody with that kind of degree could probably think and write well. And that was I definitely, I love when I see people who have those kinds of degrees when they're applying for these kinds of jobs, because they're going to have to figure out everything for the job anyway. And Josh obviously was more than capable in that regard, but it was the degree, I think, that it at least was a signal to me that he had that kind of mind.
I love
my
that.
classics professor would be very happy right now. And it kind of takes me to a similar point too. Like when you're in small markets, like this is a similar philosophy we have for like hiring paralegals, right? So in Memphis, I mean, again, before COVID, where people started hiring remote from everywhere, kind of putting on the law firm hat for a second, it's like, we were looking for English majors, right? People who could write really well, really good writers. And so we generally didn't hire people with immigration experience in Memphis because there really weren't people to hire with immigration experience, right? So it kind of just relate, you can kind of find these, at least there's, something in that background that says these people can, their creative writing skills are there, and, that applies. So it kind of translates well. But, I do kind of have this, the tech background is sort of interesting too, because I don't think, Greg, I've ever even told you this, but my mom was she worked kind of as an adjunct assistant to colleges and helped them train on early stage computer training. So when I was a kid, I was around, like, we're not talking, Apple II, like, we're talking, Apple Color, like in the like later 90s kind of thing. But, so it's a little bit later on, but I do remember having a computer around when that wasn't necessarily just like a normal thing. Right. So there was something to that. I just maybe never put it all together until later on. But again, I never even knew that would be part of this position, but it became part of the position over time. Anyway, yeah. It was,
Josh, when I was a kid, my uncle ran a computer store in Tel Aviv, like in the 90s. Like this was, in the US, we had CompUSA, we had maybe Circuit City or whoever was building computers. They didn't have that in Israel. And so he had a small shop where if you wanted a desktop, you come in, you order it, and he builds it. And guess who's helping build the computers? It was like 8-year-old me who was taking the motherboard. I was sticking like the RAM into the motherboard and screwing everything in. Like I put together the whole thing. And to your point, I didn't learn how to code. I mean, I learned a little bit on my own later on just for fun, but I never I went to college, had no interest in studying computer science. Like or engineering at all. I never connected those two things, but that comfort, just being around it, at a young age, it just, it's sort of by osmosis. You just you get something from it. You become comfortable around it. And I think at least for me, when I was in a position to actually dive into things that were computer related, I wasn't scared. Like I knew I had to learn something, but I wasn't fundamentally scared because I had been exposed to computers, trying to load up, Duke Nukem 3D on my old PC in like 1996 and having to enter prompts and whatnot and using different floppy drives. Like there's nothing in it to that, but I wasn't afraid of the computer interface. So I do think that there's something to that, Josh, for sure.
Right. You're kind of eliminating that because maybe fear exists in this, like when this mystery, right? There's this unknown. Yeah. It's like, when people I remember when I first started the firm in 2015, the cloud, it's like everybody was like, what is the cloud? It's like people they were like commercial people would look up, the cloud. Right. So like people did, and there was actually a very strong sentiment that almost every organization was not going to put anything in the cloud, right? Like that was actually a very controversial when like companies that exist today that are great companies like NetDocuments, for example, and these others are like, oh, well, we started in the cloud. It was like, but that wasn't always like the like good, like the hip thing to do. It was right. And so I think the same thing is like if you can take the mystery out of it and just be like, oh yeah, this is just what RAM and a motherboard and some like whatever. It's like you can kind of put it all together and be like, oh yeah, that's all fundamentally this is. It's not a some secret like alien in a box.
And I think to transition, with law firm immigration lawyers and really any lawyers or professionals using AI, and that's why really the thing is, look, if you're afraid of it, you don't want to use it for your law firm right away. That's okay. Go and try to play with ChatGPT or what have you, just personally, right? Just get exposed to it. That in an environment that doesn't expose you to any professional risk, but can give you some understanding of how it works. I want to take a quick pause here just to say thank you to Journey for being, the second sponsor of this episode. Journey, Joorney. So for those who don't know, Journey provides immigration business plans. They partner with immigration law firms and global mobility professionals, and they create tailor-made business plans for all sorts of visas: E2s, EB2 NIWs, EB5s, L1, new business or new office applications, etc. So, if you have clients coming in from any place around the world, US, Canada, or I should say Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Singapore, South Africa, India, you name it, coming into the US, although they also work with Canadian immigration professionals and others, and you have entrepreneurs or any kind of business visas, try out Journey, see if, try out their business plans, and focus on what you do best. I talked to a few law firms that are like, yeah, I do my own business plans. And I always tell them, look, you're a lawyer. Maybe you have some business acumen, but if you're creating a business plan for immigration purposes, it's not the same thing as what you learned in business school. So work with the specialists, check out Journey. They've been doing this for a lot of years. I've known them for a number of years. They're an awesome team. They have a ton of experience. So check them out. So there's a link in the show notes, or check them out at joorney.com. You can see samples of their work. And if you reach out to them, tell them you heard about them from the GMI Rocket Show. So I want to now bring us to, we know, Josh, how you got to this firm and, your trajectory. You started kind of in an operations, role, trying to make the whole thing more efficient. Then it sort of morphed into this thing around technology. Started with what Visalaw.ai was before, with the no code, low code options. And then eventually, as you said, Greg, when ChatGPT or when generative AI started to come out, you realized we need something for the immigration space that's actually trained on, immigration specific text, and it isn't pulling from other sources that might be wrong. So can you share a little bit about how did this current, iteration of Visalaw.ai get started, and what does the product actually do today?
Sure. So, at its origins, we were looking at it, like I said, it was a co-counsel from Casetext, which has since become part of Thomson Reuters, and people are pretty familiar with, obviously, with Westlaw. When we were originally thinking about it, it was just in the context of, could we put together a really solid immigration library that when people posted questions, it would answer them. If people posted documents, it would summarize them, some very basic functions at the beginning that we were thinking about. And then as we were, really starting to work on it, we were realizing the capabilities are way beyond just sort of simple. It's not just basically a different version of online legal research on there that we had seen, that it's actually, I give this example. You have a a first year associate who comes in to your practice, and you have some obscure question that you want the kid to research, and you'll lay it out as far as like what the research task is, and then you'll ask them to write it in a in a legal memo format and attach the source materials for it, so you can verify that the associate did a good job in answering the questions. And I tell people, it's like, who freak out about hallucinations and all that, it's like, you wouldn't trust a first year associate either, who might be super smart. You want to see the sources, and that's why citations are so important in these products, and looking at it. But what's the next thing that happens with this junior associate? They do this research for you and it looks great, and it's like, okay, now the next thing I want you to do is make a checklist for the client, or send the client a questionnaire form, with the information that we need, or write a memo to the client explaining what you just told me in very complicated legal terms, but make it accessible to them, or maybe draft a cover letter to USCIS, or all these follow-up tasks that come from the original task that you were asking the AI. And that is how, that's how I think people that are power users using the product kind of look at it that way, is they're looking at at Jen as sort of their junior associate or their senior paralegal or whoever, and they are asking it the research question is just usually the first part of the conversation. And that's another thing that I also tell people is try it out this way, is that I get emails all day long from people, some clients, some non-clients, asking me complicated questions or giving me facts and giving me what their situation is. And a lot of times I'll just take that email and I'll paste it in, and I'll just ask Jen, like, what do you think? And that's literally all I'll say. What do you think? And then I'll colon, paste in the question, and then it'll give me an analysis of the issues that it sees, what questions and I'll ask it, what questions should I ask the client to get, what additional information should I be asking? Do you have any sort of strategy suggestions? And I'll talk to it like, this is another sort of analogy. When you may get one of these queries, and if you're in a firm with a couple of lawyers, you might go knock on the lawyer's, door down the hall and say, hey, this just came up. What do you think? I mean, what am I missing here? What on there? And that's how, that's typically how the conversation will work. So that's one part of the product, a very important part. And it's really, I think, does a great job because it's built on this library that is very expansive. It has we have this wonderful partnership. I'm not supposed to say partnership, but one collaboration with American Immigration Lawyers Association, where we get all of their we get almost all of their books and their practice advisories, and a lot of their materials, which are really critical, I think, to complementing all the primary law that we get. So we have millions of pages of content that are in the data set, and all these generative AI tools are doing is basically they have these algorithms. It's a word guesser, and it's basically putting together answers based on what it thinks the user's looking for based on the materials that it's accessing. Using ChatGPT, it's accessing the entire web, which may sound good. It's like, oh, it's the whole world, but it's actually not good, because a lot of the answers that are coming are not, they're not curated. They're not limited to sources that are reliable. So that was a critical part of this project as well, is how do we build this library that's going to be the biggest immigration library in the world? What do we need? How do we curate it? How do we keep it up to date? What are the materials that have to be on the must-have materials that have to be in there? How do we deal with getting the AAO database? That was the AAO decisions. There's 120,000 decisions that are in that data set. How do we scrape all that from the government? How do we get all of that into our product? And so we were dealing with a lot of those things, and that's so for me, that was that was one of the most exciting parts of working on the product, was putting that together. The other thing that now I spend a lot of my time on, and Josh can talk about drafts because he's much more focused on that than I've been, but I love the prompt engineering aspects of what we do. And so we have this part of the product called Document Q&A, and this is where you can basically have your own recipes for different kinds of projects that you want to take on. So one example that I think I don't know if we've rolled it out to everybody, but I think we will, is a crimmigration prompt. And the prompt itself is about 10 pages, is to give you an idea of sort of how long a really good prompt will take. But what we've done with this prompt is the lawyer will upload the criminal sentencing documents for the client. they will upload, and we now have, by the way, all statutes and regulations and all case law from the entire body of law in the United States. So that's it's at least 10 million plus documents that are accessible in just on all that non-immigration library that we have. But once the lawyer uploads the lawyer will upload the statute that the conviction happened under, and then something new that we have is you can take a document in our library and link it to and move it into your personal library for the purposes of creating prompts. So this test we take Mary Kramer's wonderful book on criminal immigration law that AOA publishes. You can link that to your personal library. And then, so what I've done in this prompt is I asked the prompt to analyze the criminal sentencing documents and apply it to the law that I've uploaded, and use Mary's book to help write a legal memo, essentially telling me whether the offense is a crime of moral turpitude or an aggravated felony, and giving me guidance on how to look at that. And that, I think, is sort of a very easy. It's obviously there's some legal research that's involved here, but it's also legal analysis that these tools are helping you. And that's where I get a lot of joy, when I write one of these, massive, very complicated prompts, and then I actually see it working on there, and it's just like eureka on there. It works. We've done that in a bunch of things, and that's so for me, I get a lot of I get a kick out of that part of it, and I like talking with users that are doing that kind of thing in their practices.
That's, I can't believe a 10-page prompt. Do you find that is the idea that it's so thorough that effectively almost any, matter that you have, it'll sort of address? I mean, is that the idea behind such a long prompt?
I'll give you a dirty secret. So I will start out drafting this by myself, and then what I will do is I will take what I've written and I will put it into our private GPT tool, which does look at all of the web, but it does it in a way that it's not leaking any confidential information or anything like that. And I'll ask it for suggestions for how to improve this prompt. And it'll give them to me. Then the other thing I have boilerplate that from some of the really good prompts that we've had, I have these boilerplate for to improve the performance of the prompt. So like to reduce hallucinations, I have this language about the double check on there. Like before you tell me the answer, look at the answer that you were going to tell me and check it and do one last pass to see if you have any change you want. You wouldn't think that would be necessary, but it helps on there. And there's a bunch of those kinds of things that I have, that I've had that I can use over and over again to help it improve the work. And also, one really important thing with prompting is you'll get a much better response if you give it an example of what a good response would look like. So I may, if I get I may sort of mock up a memo, or I mock up, I'll tell it's task 1, do this, task 2, do this. But in a lot of cases, if I can give it a good example of what an acceptable answer, I'll get a lot more consistency as far as what it's going to do with that. But there's a lot of techniques, and I think the nice thing is it really doesn't require much in the way of technical skill at all. It's like, the same thing with giving that assignment to the associate on there. If you just tell the associate and give them one line and say, go find me the answer to this, versus saying, I want you to do a memo and I want you to sort of research this, and these are the kind of the questions I want you to ask yourself, and I want you to lay it out this way. And the more detail you give in the instructions, when you give that assignment, you're going to get something that's probably a lot better for what you would want. And then you're not going to complain that they gave me kind of a shoddy answer and all that. Well, part of that's because you didn't do your job, which is to be a good delegator of a task.
And I think that's a really great analogy for folks to think about, that prompt engineering and AI, it is similar. I mean, you have to put in a little bit of work. It will, the software will do the research, it'll do the drafting for you, but it won't read your mind. You do have to, put into words the kind of things that you want it to do. I want to talk a little bit about the Gen draft. So Josh, do you want to share a little bit about kind of what that, I know they're both within the Gen product. And by the way, the company is Visalaw.ai, but the product is Gen, right? GEN. And you
Right,
have
right.
Gen.
Yeah, and it kind of allude to what you were talking about earlier with the evolution of things. Like when I think about Visalaw as a company, I think about iterations, right? Like it's almost like we've had 3 companies at this point. Like it probably would have been just easier if we had a different name. But I think through all that trial and tribulation comes, hopefully now what we hope is a well-polished machine. But the drafting, I think, is essentially an evolution of what we started with, an evolution, like basically just like, or a continuation of research, a continuation of having this data set. And then just as Greg has been building out these prompts, we sort of realized like, well, we can do shorter, like we can build opinion letters, or we can build, like we started just like the simplest things. And then we realized, well, we found some workarounds to be able to actually generate larger and larger documents. And that's what kind of progressed and where we are now. But drafts, I've got the lingo now, but it's the vertical, right? Like it seems like the area that all these, at least several young startups are focused in. And our entire focus for the last 6 to 8 months has been quality. Like I think fundamentally we could go out, get the best, tech, the best UI. At the end of the day, if the drafts are not good enough for attorneys, it doesn't matter, right? Like, you can build the framework and the shell and like all the bells and whistles. Like if we can build a draft that an attorney would approve as a substitute for having to outsource or hire someone or have insource someone internally at their firm draft it, then this could be a revolutionary technology, right? Like, akin to, and probably even more disruptive than like case management, right? Like form filling, right? This conventional thing that like we all use to save time as immigration firms. Like this is way more revolutionary than that, right? Because it's doing a lot more work. So if it can work, then it will be a meaningful solution. So our focus has been on quality. Now it was idea, validate the idea through primarily the extraordinary ability categories. So we started with, a lot of the folks have been focused on the EB1, A, EB1B, O1, NIW, some other, business focused processes. But now we've diversified and we're, figuring out some of the other family-based processes, including humanitarian areas like asylum. And we partnered with a few different firms to help us. But the underlying technology is basically step in after you've collected all the documentation from the client and basically import all that data to our system and allow the engine to basically draft the brief or the petition letter. And some optional steps, right? They can draft a summary of the document list. They can draft those opinion letters that I was talking about, the kind of lower hanging fruit, this like shorter letters, but it basically will do the first draft. And then, the kind of part we're adding in now is like the entire pack. It's a PDF merging tool, right? Just packet assembly, and more about like the workflow though, like the actual review process, because usually it's not the attorney drafting this, or if it is, it's like a multi-person kind of team or collaboration. So we're kind of trying to dial up the kind of workflow aspect of it as well.
What about forms? Like how do forms fit into this entire, so you're saying you have a document or a packet assembly, you can do the research and the drafting of various things, cover letter, maybe, a country conditions report or what have you. How does Gen, integrate with or operate with respect to immigration forms?
Yeah. So we have made a strategic decision not to build them out in our platform, mainly because we just don't want to reinvent the wheel. Like there are so many other, like you mentioned DocWise, great company, great system that they have. And others like DocWise who built out case management systems that are really effective at those things. We plan to integrate, right? That's our trajectory, right? Like we want to connect to the systems that firms are already using as a sort of like honestly, at the end of the day, we don't even view ourselves as like a UI, right? Like basically if we're just happening behind the scenes and we're just that, we have the expertise, we have the prompts, we have the engine that's going to draft the thing, and then just bring it back into wherever you're actively working throughout your day, right? So we do have a platform, people can log in, they can do things in there. But yeah, I think our ultimate goal is to hopefully integrate with, integrate with leading case management. And we can't announce it today, but we do actually have a strategic partnership, which we finalized, that will be coming out very soon around that kind of idea.
That's awesome. Should have waited for this episode.
I know. I should have
released that news.
Let's wait like a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Look, it makes total sense. I'm all about same thing with Laborless, right? We're a product. We've decided strategically not to go into things like case management or what have you. You know, we have our clients, and our clients have sometimes even expressed frustration with their existing platforms. They come to me as a tech CEO and they're like, Roman, can you build something? You know, we like your product, we like you, et cetera. And I tell them, look, there's so many great companies out there that are focused on case management. It's just a different beast, and why compete with them when I'd rather connect with them? And, you know, okay, if one of them isn't great for you, another one will be great, but there are typically enough out there in the market to make almost everybody happy. And then you and I and whatever, you know, all the folks that are doing specific kind of, you know, more niche vertical, products within our immigration vertical, we can focus and we can get really, really good at our thing and integrate with others. So I am a big proponent of that. So just as a quick note, I just want to say we had Faisal, who's a fellow immigration lawyer from Saudi Arabia, says hello, Greg and Roman, and Josh as well to you. So hi, Faisal. So thank you for that. We have another immigration entrepreneur, Richard Allman from Florida, saying hi. So hey, Richard. So really nice to see people tuning in and watching and listening to this live as well. So I know I want to wrap up here and just ask you guys, it sounds like you have some partnerships and integrations coming out. What are you looking forward to, either with respect to what you guys are building with Gen, or maybe more broadly with, you know, AI in the immigration space? You know, what are you guys foreseeing in the next, let's say, 2 to 5 years?
Do you want to take it first, Greg?
Well, one thing I'm kind of psyched about is the some of the developments that are coming. I mean, a lot of it's what we're doing is driven by the capabilities of the large language models. And one of the things that I'm excited about is its ability to do a much better job in processing voice and not just getting written instructions. And so I'm envisioning, for example, Gen being a plugin to Zoom, into Teams, into all these other tools, where you can have it actually, like if you were doing a consultation, where you could have it giving you instant feedback on things that you're discussing with a client, and giving you suggestions for things that you should be asking, hearing questions that you're asking the client, spotting red flags. Being able to then take instructions on generating starting a draft of something at the conclusion of the conversation. So, you know, I'm looking at it as more of a, you know, if you have this very bright, colleague that was essentially around you all day long, or, what would be the tasks that you could potentially rely on that person for? And it's the same thing I'm thinking about what our product can be doing.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
I agree with what Greg's saying. I think for me, on the short term, it's the adoption curve, right? Like, I mean, I think the first year's been great. You know, I think we've gotten more traction than we probably would have thought, you know, if we were like to go back to January when we first released everything. I think there are a lot of firms that are like, you go first and we'll see how it goes for you. And then, right. And there could be other things like security requirements and, things we're kind of building out as we actually just grow as a company. In terms of AI generally, though, to me, it's kind of the space where if I'm looking out 3 to 5 years, to me, it's all about agentic AI. Like I can't really see a world where it's not, in terms of just like taking what we're doing right now with text and just extending it out to, it can do like multiple workflows, and it's like actually like completing, like it's, going out, checking a source, completing a spreadsheet, doing like it's actually doing a lot of this administrative work. And I don't know exactly what it means, but it from the early things I've seen, like where AI can actually just interact with user interfaces, right, and like do things that are just, to me, kind of unbelievable. But that to me seems to be, again, I don't know what it all means, but I'm sure we'll be incorporating something like that. Maybe if we're talking 5 years from now.
And I feel like, especially the legal industry, although I've been so pleasantly surprised as to how much more innovative the immigration space has been than I expected. I think we actually are one of the leading industries across all of legal. Probably my hunch is that part of it may be because immigration tends to be flat fee based. And so there's just typically an impetus for technological innovation because it sort of makes everything easier. And so there's more of an appetite for tech, but this, I mean, we go to conferences and you'll talk to people who still have never used any AI product. Some people who forget about AI, they don't use a lot of technology at all, but there are always laggards and leaders in any industry. I will say, though, that still for professional services, it'll always fall behind sort of, the most sophisticated AI being used in some less risky industry. Typically arts, somebody's creating a tool that helps you, I don't know, create a 20-minute feature film totally through a prompt. Cool. What will it do for us? I don't know, but it'll be, that we'll leverage that technology. So yeah, with agentic AI, which is basically going to be human, we'll put that technology into the Tesla robot, and then we'll have folks. By the way, I was in London. So Greg, you and I were in London last week at a conference, and I was at a train station, and I almost tripped over one of those cleaning robots, and it started beeping because I got really close to it. So it was just, and I've never almost bumped into a robot before, and it was really kind of bizarre. I imagine it being a person in a New York City subway saying, "Hey, watch where you going," but it was just a robot that started beeping at me, and I thought this is the future of altercations in an urban environment. Anyway, it was funny. I just had never had that experience before. So that's where I see always like the most leading tech experimenting, and then it finds its way back to, let's say, what we're doing in the legal space, where you really have to be exact and sure that it's not messing up somebody's life. Love this conversation. We had a comment here from Marianne, said we need a part 2 of this discussion because it's been great to hear all your insights. Thank you, Marianne, for your comments and for tuning in. So Greg, Josh, this has been really, really awesome. Thank you. Really excited to see where Visalaw.ai is come with Jen, and I know for sure I've seen a product as well. It looks beautiful, and a lot of great feedback. So wishing you guys all the luck with everything you're building now, and I'm excited to see where it really continues to go in year 2. So thank you for being here. I appreciate it.
Thanks,
Absolutely.
Roman.
Thank you.
Amazing discussion. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Just want to give another quick thank you to DocketWise for being the main sponsor of this episode. Again, DocketWise, we mentioned it in the episode, but it's an all-in-one immigration case management system. So they do the forms, right? They have questionnaires that go out to clients to get information and documentation for them, et cetera. They do collect all this data. So ideally, a company like Gen AI or other tech companies that DocketWise integrates with can leverage some of those documents and information that a company like DocketWise gathers. DocketWise has a ton of integrations. So if you are an immigration law firm and you're in the market for a case management system, whether you do family-based or a business immigration, check out DocketWise. They have a ton of features. Again, a lot of integrations. They're a great team, and I'm grateful for their support. So the website is docketwise.com, or check the link that is in the show notes here and visit that to learn more about them, schedule a demo, and check it out. By the way, if you're not in the market for case management, check them out anyway, right? See what they're working on. Maybe an idea for the future for you. So with that, thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for all of the engagement. It was an awesome episode. See you here next week for another episode of the GMI Rocket Show. And in the meantime, have a great weekend and be safe. Peace out.